Ken Jennings and Brian Davidson, were almost inseparable when we were kids. We lived close to each other, and my dad and his mom were brother and sister. They were loving brother and sister to each other. My aunt and uncle were friendly and funny, so our families often got together. Although all 6 cousins were close, 3 for each family, Ken and I were the closest. As almost always happens, Ken and I eventually grew apart, mostly due to geography, since Ken's family moved 3,000 kilometers away when we were both 11. We were both single for a year. We eventually got used to it and still talked whenever we could. We got together for 3 family reunions before we both headed off to college. While attending college on opposite coasts, we kind of lost touch. Because Ken was still single and had plenty of vacation time saved up, even though he lived 3,000 miles away, he was able to attend my wedding to Carol the year after Carol, and I graduated from college that year. Same year. In fact, he was even one of mine best men and arrived a week before the wedding. It was great to get close to him again. He lived at my parents' house since the wedding took place in the city where we grew up for the first 11 years of our lives, so I often saw him in the days before the wedding. I was sure that Carol was the love of my life. She was pretty, funny, smart, and had no difficult personality traits or problems that I could discern in the 3 years we dated, 2 in college and 1 after. She liked to have a good time, but she was not a persistent flirt and wanted to eventually have children and live behind a picket fence, just like me. Ken and Carol seemed to get along great until our bachelor and bachelorette parties ended every 2 days before the wedding. Ken seemed awkward around her then. Since I had so much to do in the last 2 days before the wedding, I never asked him about it. Unfortunately, things didn't work out for Carol and I. In a situation too trivial to be considered real, after we had been married for 2 years, one day autumn I got a stomach ache at a professional football game on Sunday and left before halftime to go back to our 2-bedroom apartment. I caught her cheating with Jeremy, one of her co-workers I'd dated a couple of times. Since I was already feeling sick, the shock of seeing them brought me to the point where I could tell I was going to throw up. If I weren't so sick, both from my stomach issues and from seeing the love of my life cheating, I might have done some physical damage to one or both of them. Instead, I just collapsed on the floor, wanting to die right then and there. I think I even blacked out for a while, although I did hear some noisy activity and a series of "oh shit," as well as some crying or screaming, which I couldn't distinguish given my state at the time. After an indefinite period of time, my ability to think fully returned, and I stood up. There was no sign of Jeremy or Carol. I took off my clothes, which I also threw up a little on, right in our bedroom, and left them on the floor. I then went to our second bathroom and took a shower, and then climbed into bed in the guest bedroom, again wishing I had died. I was physically and emotionally exhausted and fell asleep at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and didn't wake up until 7 on Monday morning. Even though my stomach was now calm enough for me to work, I called in sick and took the day off because I was emotionally on edge. Luckily, Carol was not home on Monday morning. I moped around for a few hours, collecting some of my clothes and accessories, packing them into a couple of suitcases with the intention of finding another place to live. We only had 6 weeks left on our apartment lease, and obviously I had no intention of renewing it. I would let the landlord know about this as soon as I feel a little better. Around 10 in the morning, my mobile phone rang. The caller ID said this was Tiffany, Carol's bridesmaid at our wedding, and someone I got along well with, although I thought she was immature for a 25-year-old girl. "Brian is listening," was my stellar greeting. Tiffany didn't beat around the bush. "Brian Carroll here, and she feels terrible." "Why is that, Tiff?" I answered. She didn't like being called Tiff, but at that point, any friend of Carol's was my enemy. Well, you know, Because of yesterday, she stammered. What about yesterday? You don't mean she cheated while I was at the football game, do you? She seemed to be enjoying herself, so what was so terrible about it? Uh, well, uh, Tiff stuttered. She certainly didn't get a degree in public speaking from the College of Justice. Um, she wants to come and talk to you about it, but she's afraid you'll get really angry. Maybe I could come too, she continued. Despite my depression and residual stomach problems, I quickly figured it out. Of course, Tiff. Why don't you and her come on Wednesday evening, say around 7? I really don't want to see her before then, so I hope she can stay with you tonight and Tuesday night. Tiff seemed surprised at my willingness. Okay, let me ask Carol. I heard some muttering in the background, and then Tiff said in a sing-song voice, Great, Brian. We'll see you then, and once again, I'm so sorry, Carol. I ended the call. Now I had to definitely find a new place to live and move out by 7 o'clock on Wednesday evening. I took another shower, ate some white toast so that it would stay in my stomach and not ask for it back, and went to the phone. By 10 that evening, I had rented a small closet, and it contained most of the things I wanted to keep from our marriage, including no wedding photos or any photos of Carol at all. I also had permission to use one of the apartments that my company rented for visiting clients between Wednesday and Sunday, which would give me enough time to find a new place to live. Of course, I have never cleaned up anything at the site of betrayal, including my vomited clothes, but left everything as it was after I threw up on Jeremy and Carol. I went back to work on Tuesday, and although I was physically mostly recovered, emotionally I was a complete mess. However, my female boss, a hard-nosed ass who is really kind at heart, threatened me, so I was surprisingly productive. On Wednesday, I took a half-day off to move the rest of my belongings and leave my wedding ring on the kitchen table in my old apartment, as well as meet with a real estate agent who specialized in apartments. She promised to show me several apartments on Saturday and guaranteed that by the end of the day she would be able to find me a suitable new place to live. I turned off my cell phone around 5 p.m. on Wednesday, went to the gym and worked out for 2 hours, pumping more iron in a session than ever before. After my workout, I went to a diner for a light dinner. When I got to my company apartment at 8:30, just out of curiosity, I checked my mobile. 4 missed calls from Tiffany. I laughed and deleted the messages without listening to them. On Monday, I had an appointment with a divorce lawyer. Long story short, I got divorced within 6 months and never had to date Carol again because the shark I hired was able to avoid court-ordered marriage counseling sessions by claiming I was in therapy, which as far as my lawyer knew I was true. However, my therapy was not with a psychologist. In fact, my therapy consisted of me picking up girls in bars almost every Saturday night. Although I was still mostly empty inside after my experience with Carol, the one-night stands were physically satisfying, but weren't worth a penny in terms of my emotional healing. By the time I was divorced, as long as I had been married, my 27-year-old ass had a number of advantages. Firstly, although I have always been in good physical shape, I became a real gym freak. I had a six-pack and the ability to bench press nearly twice my 185-pound weight. I watched my diet and felt better physically than I ever had in my life. Second, I didn't have much of a personal life other than one-night stands, and in a job that was well suited to my talents, I got further and faster than anyone else in the history of the large company I worked for. In fact, almost 3 years after my divorce was final, I received a 6-figure bonus and was on top of the world. Third, since I was not tied to work, I didn't mind traveling for business and was able to see a lot of interesting places, and when my schedule allowed it, I would stay a day or two after finishing business to enjoy the city I was traveling to. I was clearly not ready for a relationship. I have kept in touch with Ken by phone and email over the years. He expressed his condolences over my divorce, but in hindsight, his comments denigrating Carol were a little harsher than they should have been since he had not seen Carol except for the week before and at the wedding, a year after my divorce. Second married Audrey. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but at that time I absolutely had to be on a business trip to Amsterdam. I sent him and his wife an expensive watch with the words "Happily Ever After" written on it and an engagement photo that he said they loved. I had never seen Audrey in person, but in the photograph she looked like a fox, although I thought her curly blonde hair and excessive makeup took away from her appearance somewhat. Shortly after I received my six-figure bonus, I had a business trip to a city in the metropolitan area where Ken and Audrey lived. However, following Murphy's Law, Ken himself was on a business trip for the first 3 days of my trip. However, he will return to the city on the last day of my business trip and the day I extend my trip. We agreed to meet at his house for dinner on Friday night that week, and for me to spend the day with him and Audrey on Saturday before flying home on Sunday. I arrived in the Keene metropolitan area early Monday afternoon, ahead of my first business meeting on Tuesday morning. I hadn't been in a relationship for a while and was expecting top-notch girls in the area since there were several million people living there. The doorman Tim at the fancy hotel I was staying at was particularly friendly, and we struck up a conversation. I love interacting with real locals in any place I visit. I arrived at the wrong time, and we actually chatted for about 10 minutes. At the end, he said with a smile, "If you need some friendly interaction during your stay at a business dinner or something like that, let me know." I was absolutely sure that I knew what it meant. I saw Tim the next morning and was honest with him. "Tim, I would really like to have a loving companion. Any suggestions?" I winked at him and slipped him a $50 bill. When he saw the face of Ulysses S. Grant staring back at him, a pale smile appeared on his face. He pulled out a card with a name, Kitty, on it, and a phone number printed in a flowy font and nothing else. "She is married, works part-time, is independent, and the only one I can really recommend. If it is not available, I can give you local service numbers." I thanked him and got into the taxi he called for me. I didn't waste any time. The 15-minute drive to my meeting place, I agreed to meet Kitty at my hotel for a drink at 8 p.m. and, if we were both up to it, maybe have a nice time afterwards. She was expensive, but since I had the opportunity to chat with her over a couple of drinks and an appearance fee before making a decision, I was on board. Kitty was unlike any girl I had used before. Her shiny dark hair was slicked back and, other than a hint of lipstick, she wore no makeup. Also, her dress was completely understated. I immediately recognized her by her white carnation. Despite the conservative nature of her dress, it did not hide her magnificent figure. I walked up to her and introduced myself as John Smith, the fictitious name I had given her over the phone, and which she obviously knew was fake, and we sat down at a table in the hotel bar. Kitty was attractive, and within 5 minutes I knew she had that factor. Within 20 minutes I had slipped $900 in cash under her desk. I gave her a $100 bill the first time I shook her hand. The hotel gym had lockers controlled by guest-specific codes, and she placed her purse and its contents in the locker after discreetly removing her protective equipment. I chuckled to myself. I wonder what she expected from me. Before putting her cell phone in her locker, she told me that she needed to make a private call. I assumed it was her husband based on what Tim told me, even though we didn't talk about her marriage while we were drinking. I gave her the key card to my room and went upstairs to 924. Kitty arrived at 924 15 minutes after me. I had a drink from the minibar in my hand and another on the table for her. She smiled and took a sip of her drink. A significant addition to her recognizable strengths was her conversation. Her conversation was not difficult. It was fun and interesting at the same time. I probably enjoyed this more than any other bed conversation I've ever had in my entire life. The next morning, we had a good laugh at breakfast. She devoured blueberry pancakes as if she were a truck driver who had been on the road for 12 hours straight. My teasing about this made her smile mischievously. I liked Kitty so much that I did something unprecedented. I asked her to repeat it that evening. "If you invite me to dinner and dancing, I'll only charge you $500, she giggled. "I really enjoyed it last night." "Agreed," I quickly answered. "You can come at 18:30 and reserve a table in any restaurant you want." My dinner and dance date on Wednesday night couldn't have gone better. By 19, I no longer remembered that I was with a married call girl. It was almost like a romantic date. Of course, at breakfast on Thursday morning, I asked her if she could spend the night again on Thursday. "Yes, let's have a quick dinner, watch a short film, and then get down to business," she smiled. This is what we did, only we didn't watch the whole movie. Thursday night was something I thought I could only dream about, not something that would actually become a reality. Kitty has outdone herself. She took everything to the next level. However, at breakfast on Friday morning, I was in shock. This was the first woman after my divorce with whom I wanted a long-term relationship, and she was not only married, but also a call girl. Kitty also seemed to be in a thoughtful state. After about 10 minutes of silence at breakfast, she moaned, "I wish this could go on for months. Unfortunately, my husband will be home tonight, and I will have to turn into Susie the housewife." "Kitty, I could fall in love with you," came spontaneously from my lips, straight from my heart, before I knew I was going to say it or could stop it. When I said this, a forlorn expression appeared on her face, and then she seemed to come to her senses and muttered with tears in her eyes, "Please don't call me if you come back to town. My life is already too complicated." Then she stood up abruptly and left, leaving 2 pancakes on the plate. Despite my anxiety and self-pity, I was a tiger in the final meetings on Friday, and by the time I went to Ken's house around 5 o'clock, I had achieved everything I wanted during the trip. When I reported to my boss, the same one who, figuratively speaking, gave me a kick in the ass when I caught Carol cheating. Every time she got promoted, I did too. She was delighted. "Spend your bonus evening or 2 in company," were her last encouraging words. By the time the taxi dropped me off at their 3-bedroom Gothic-style country house, I had suppressed my self-pity that the woman I could have easily loved was unavailable and was looking forward to meeting Ken and Audrey. Ken greeted me enthusiastically at the door with a manly hug and a pat on the back. "Wow, you look better than I've ever seen you," he blurted out. "I also feel better than ever," I blurted out in response. "Sorry, but it looks like you could use a few pounds," I chuckled, pointing my finger at his protruding, although not large, belly. "Audrey cooks too well, and I can't tear myself away from the table." "Come and meet her," he said. Fortunately, neither Audrey nor I had anything in our hands that was sure to fall out when we saw each other in the corridor between the kitchen and the hallway. Ken had already relieved me of the 1 5-liter bottle of Magnum wine and bouquet of flowers I had brought. Audrey was drumroll Kitty. Apparently noticing my slack jaw, Ken asked, "What happened, Brian?" Thinking faster than I ever had in my life, I blurted out, "The only photo I saw of Audrey had curly blonde hair and heavy makeup, but now she has straight brown hair and light makeup. I would never have recognized her." Apparently Audrey is smart too, because by the time I finished my comment, her expression had changed from shock to smiling, and she purred, "Well, Kanu, I like my natural hair color better, and he says I don't need makeup to look amazing." "I have to agree with him," I replied casually, taking her hand and kissing it. Considering the circumstances, the dinner went as well as could be. I was on autopilot, and apparently so was Audrey. It helped that the wine in the Magnum bottle I bought was Ken's favorite wine, and he drank almost the entire liter and a half. Neither Audrey nor I were interested in getting drunk for fear of what might come out of our mouths. When Ken was in the bathroom, Audrey came up to me and said, "Please don't tell Ken." I hesitated and then answered, "I'm not sure I can promise that. If I were him, I'd like to know. Let me share some information with you before you make a decision. Give me 5 minutes tonight or tomorrow, and I think you will have a different point of view," she replied. When I hesitated, she said, "Please, just do a favor for the one you called your best lover in the world in the middle of the night." I didn't remember saying that, but it was certainly true. There were many times during my interaction with Kitty Audrey when I thought this way. Okay, we'll find time to talk. Luckily, Ken made it easy for us to find time to talk. An hour after dinner, he insisted that I spend the night with him on Friday and Saturday. Audrey convinced him that he was too tired to drive and that she would drive me to and from the hotel, taking the time to get to know me. Ken was delighted with this scenario. When Audrey dropped me off at the hotel, she didn't hesitate to say she was right. "I'm only telling you this because I'm not in a position to get a divorce right now, and Ken feels very guilty about what he did to you. I'm betraying his trust by telling you." "What did you say?" I asked, truly puzzled. Audrey went into a long explanation of all the details related to her story about Ken. This took almost the entire 25-minute drive to the hotel. The gist is that the day after the bachelor and bachelorette party, which was also the day before the wedding, Ken overheard Carol's two bridesmaids talking when they didn't know he was around. They were apparently stunned that Carol had cheated on me at her bachelorette party and then arranged to meet him when she returned from her honeymoon. When Audrey asked why Ken didn't tell me about this before the wedding, especially since he perfectly understood that fidelity was important to me, he simply brushed her off and said, "It's not my problem, and I didn't want him to kill the messenger." Years later, he felt bad about it, but he swore he would never, ever tell me about it, even during or after my divorce. The details of Audrey's story fit perfectly with the time, place, and events surrounding my wedding to Carol, and I had no doubt that it was true. This certainly explained why Ken's reaction to Carol changed shortly before the wedding and why he was so persistent in telling me "good riddance" when we talked on the phone during my divorce process. When I collected all my clothes and documents from the hotel and checked out, I thought about nothing else except Brian, Ken, and Audrey's relationships and my past with Carol. If I had known what Ken did at that time, I would have called off the wedding. It would have saved me from wasting 3 years of my life. One good thing was that my mind was clear when I slept with Audrey. By the time I got back to Audrey's car, I had decided never to tell Ken about Audrey's side business as Kitty. As soon as I plopped down in the passenger seat, I informed Audrey of my decision. This brought a smile from her and a passionate kiss. By this time, I felt comfortable enough with Audrey to ask her about her side business. "Why do you work as a call girl?" I boldly asked her. "You can tell me to mind my own business, and I'll never bring it up again, but my mind thirsts for this information like a man in the desert thirsts for water." "I'll tell you," she giggled, and then did it. Like the story of Ken's betrayal of me, this story was long, complicated, detailed, and nuanced. The bottom line is that Ken basically sabotaged her career, insisted that she be a housewife, even though they had no children, and he had no intention of having any, contrary to what he told her before they got married, and lost most of the desire for sex. She worked as a call girl to earn enough money to end her marriage with dignity. Although by the time we got back to their house, I didn't approve, at least I understood her point of view. When we got inside, Ken had already fallen into a wine-induced sleep. After Audrey left their bedroom with this information, she showed me the guest bedroom. I blocked the door when she was about to leave. "I really need something to help me sleep," I chuckled. And Kenna is in himself. On Saturday, the three of us did some sightseeing in the city, had lunch at a famous restaurant in the main city park, and generally enjoyed ourselves. In the late afternoon, Audrey and I went to her health club to work out. Ken had never been much of an exerciser, and I was impressed by her daily routine. After the shower, we headed out for dinner and then some drinks. Ken got drunk again, so Audrey and I had some more fun. On Sunday, Ken wanted to watch football. I wasn't as big an NFL fan as I was before I came home from the game and caught Carol cheating, so Audrey volunteered to drive me to the airport. On the way, we had a frank conversation. "I really like you, Brian," she began the conversation. "Not only sex, you are an interesting and funny guy. What do you think?" After a long pause, I decided to be honest. As I already blurted out once, I could fall in love with you. However, I'm going to try to forget you. I don't like the idea of termination of your marriage to my cousin, despite how meanly he treated me by not informing me of Carol's real character. And while I certainly took advantage of it, I'm not sure I could have passed you by if you weren't a call girl. That's fair enough, and I understand. However, I have a lot to think about. I'm going to divorce Ken anyway, and I've already lost my taste for being a call girl after my short affair with you. So I quit. How about we just stay in touch? I will allow you to control the pace and nature of our future communication. Are you okay with that, Brian? I didn't have to pause in response to this. Sounds like a plan, I chuckled. I would like to sew off her, but the memories of how good we were did not allow me to do this. Over the next year, I visited Ken and Audrey's town 3 times, twice for business and once just to see Audrey. I never told Ken that I would be in town during any of my visits and only spent time with Audrey. Audrey was so sultry, funny, smart, and interesting that I had a really hard time convincing myself that I wasn't in love with her. Sex with her ruined me for other women, and for the next year, the only time I had sex with anyone other than her was when I was depressed after a phone call with her and picked up a girl at a bar who was somewhat similar to her. It's been about 380 days, not that I'm counting, since I first met Audrey when the receptionist in the main lobby of our building called around 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. "You have a female visitor. She says her name is Kitty. Should I send her upstairs?" "What the hell?" flashed through my head. Apparently, I was speechless for a long time because the administrator asked, "Are you here, Mr. Schuss Davidson?" I replied, "Oh, sorry, Monique. I'll go down now to take her upstairs." Because we were in a public place, Audrey and I didn't kiss when I met her in the lobby, but we did give each other a quick hug. "What brings you to town, Audrey?" I asked as we took the elevator to my office. "I have some news that I want to share with you and then talk seriously about our relationship," she smiled. "I'll show you my office and introduce you to my boss. Then at 5:30 p.m. or so we can go out to dinner and then talk at my apartment. How does this sound? We can also deliver your luggage to my apartment." "Fine, and I won't stop you from doing the work you need, but I hope you don't mind if I stay for the weekend," she answered. We waited until dinner was over, and we walked around a nearby small lake before Audrey and I went to my apartment, and she said what was on her mind. She did not mince words. "Here is a copy of my divorce decree," she said, handing me a paper from the small suitcase that she carried with her throughout the day. I quickly scanned it. It was what she imagined and dated 3 days earlier. As soon as I pulled away from him, she handed over several other papers. "This is a sonogram of our baby growing in my belly, a little girl, as well as a prenatal non-invasive DNA test taken earlier this week that shows you are her father." I gulped as I looked through these documents. I was going to ask how she got my DNA, but then I realized how ridiculous it was to ask. These documents also turned out to be what she said they were. And again, as soon as I took my eyes off them, my mouth suddenly went dry. She handed me another document. This is a proposed prenuptial agreement that states that if we get married, and if I then ever have sex of any type with any other person other than you, I will only leave the marriage with my clothes, jewelry, and any car I bring into the marriage. Marriage and $5 and nothing more, and that I will not challenge custody of our child or children. It was too much, but my mouth was so dry that I didn't think I could respond verbally and be understood. So I just read the document. Again, everything was exactly as she described. When I looked up again, she continued, "There is no way I can prove with certainty that I am no longer a call girl, but I have signed an affidavit to that effect, which states that if you ever prove otherwise, that I have had sex with anyone other than you or Ken for the last year, I will pay you $25,000. I also have an affidavit from Tim, the doorman who put you in touch with me, that I told him I was no longer available, and that he hasn't mentioned my name to anyone else in the last year." She held out 2 more sheets. As my mouth became even more dry, I read the 2 affidavits. Again, they were exactly as she imagined them to be. Finally, I talked to your mother. I met her at my wedding to Ken, and we seemed to hit it off. I've talked to her on the phone and exchanged emails over the years. I didn't tell her much about our relationship, but I asked her what difficulties would arise for her and your father if I left Ken and you and I somehow got along. I don't have her affidavit, but you can confirm with her that she doesn't object, even though it would probably prevent another full family reunion. After this last statement, a forced smile appeared on her face. I don't know what to say. Finally, stuttering, I squeezed out, "You need time to think. Let's go to bed. You'll think about it and share your thoughts with me, no matter how long it takes. Maybe even by the end of the weekend." For the rest of the weekend, nothing more was said about any of the issues she raised or the documents she showed me. There were 2 reasons for this. The first was that she wanted to give me space and time to think without any pressure or arguments. Second, my brain had so many endorphins churning like the Amazon in the rainy season that there was little chance that I would be able to truly think. And since I obviously didn't have a chance to think things through by Monday, I invited Audrey to stay at my apartment while I was leaving for work and relax. It took me 2 weeks before I came to a firm decision on the issues raised by Audrey. During this time, Audrey never pressured me at all or even mentioned it. What finally made me decide was the joy of having someone to come home to and share my day with. Having a constant, cheerful life partner is the most important thing. 2 weeks after Audrey's arrival, when we were walking around the same small lake as on the first evening of her arrival, halfway there I got down on my knee and pulled out a ruby engagement ring. I knew that she wanted something completely different from the diamond one she returned after the divorce and asked her to marry me. She pretended to think it over before answering, but as soon as I started tickling her, she said yes. She signed the marriage contract she had prepared. I talked to my parents and even my aunt and uncle, Ken's parents, and then we got married in a small ceremony 3 weeks after I proposed. That was 5 years ago, and I added 2 more children, just 2 girls and a boy. These were the 5 happiest years of my life. My reality of falling in love with my cousin's wife while she was working as a call girl after leaving my first wife for cheating on me and then eventually entering into a monogamous happy marriage with her is strange. Then fiction. However, I don't think about it too much. I'm just enjoying life. Ken and I haven't spoken since we got married. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Second story. My name is Dale Solomon. I can't say I'm ashamed or proud of everything I've done. Sometimes life itself forces you to make difficult decisions. I grew up loving, but pretty cramped in the means of the family. I have two older sisters and two younger brothers. I am that middle child in age. Since money was tight for us, I worked starting in my teens. Despite the fact that many people told me that I was a very smart boy, most of the work that fell to me was rough and hard, but it brought me money for necessary expenses. When I was in school, I sometimes had to donate blood and biological samples to make ends meet and pay my daily expenses. I met Celeste, and we were together after 6 weeks of dating. I worked 32 hours a week, which was just enough to earn extra benefits. Although it cost me almost all of my free time, I also took 14 credit hours in evening courses. Celeste worked in the office of one of the insurance offices. Even when we added up our two incomes, tuition and living expenses did not allow us to accumulate any savings. The only way to survive was to keep your eyes on the horizon slipping away in the distance, waiting for some chance thrown by luck. When the lack of money began to seem like a truly insurmountable obstacle, or rather we, decided that a short service in the army would do me good. The benefits mentioned in the GI Bill seemed like the best long-term solution. A month after I started boot camp, Celeste told me she was pregnant. She also said that her parents agreed to help with the child when the appropriate time came. I was young and stupid. Yes, I know this is not an acceptable excuse, but then I was so devastated that it didn't even occur to me to check. We had been married for 2 years when Celeste gave birth to our son. If it had been a girl, she would have been named Gloria. Since it was a boy, we agreed on the name Darrell Thomas in advance. And, less than a month after giving birth, I was served with divorce papers. At that time, I was still in the service, far from my home. In the petition for divorce, Celeste did not demand from me either alimony or money for child support. Attached to her application was a copy of my birth certificate, which stated in black and white that I no longer had a son named Darrell Thomas Solomon. Instead, the document identified Celeste's co-worker, Wendell, as the child's father Trute. That's how Darrell Thomas disappeared, and the child's name was Wendell instead Trute Jr. The petition did not stipulate any conditions for the visit, since formally I was no longer the boy's father. My comrades convinced me that losing such a wife was the best possible outcome for me. It was difficult to object to this. However, try telling that to my broken heart. Since the day I was served with the divorce papers, I have never spoken to Celeste. Don't get me wrong, it took me a long time to regain my confidence and trust in women. But in the end, I succeeded. I found a woman who truly loves me. And even despite this, we achieved almost nothing. I met Dee at one of the neighborhood barbecues. She was the sister of one of my neighbors, whom I didn't know very well at the time. Although she had been to a few of these parties before, we had never spent much time together. That evening I was too, in a shell, still worried about the consequences of the divorce, to take the first step. Dee sensed my stiffness and broke the ice by talking to me. "I heard you wore a military uniform," she asked, casually starting a conversation. "Yes, ma'am. And you?" "No, I'm a completely civilian person," she smiled. "How long have you been back?" "About 9 months. "Are you here alone today?" I asked just in case. "And not only today. What about you?" Imperceptibly and easily, she switched to a more informal style of communication. "Yes, free and carefree," I grinned, adapting to her communication style and feeling as if this woman and I had known each other for a long time. "I'm just trying to be sociable." "What house do you live in?" "Oh, I don't live next door. My sister invited me here. There she is," she said, pointing to the woman, talking with someone on the side who was not at all like her. "Well then, what brings you here?" "You," she answered briefly and simply, with a Mona Lisa smile and some twinkle in her eyes. "Well, yes, of course. Although I've already seen you at several such gatherings," I reassured her. "Oh, I see. You think you're the only one who's allowed to be shy. Well, nameless lady, how do you feel about getting out of here, eating some ice cream, and going to the movies? By the way, my name is Dale," I introduced myself, putting forward a businesslike and quite cultural proposal, which under certain conditions could have an interesting continuation for both of us. "I would love that, Dale. How about you call me D?" And so we charted and together charted a course that led us to moving in together 8 months later. D was studying and preparing to take the exams soon to become a lawyer. After receiving my bachelor's degree, I got a management position in a distribution center. We rented a house in an ordinary residential area. From time to time, we would take a vacation and go to Las Vegas for the weekend. Life together seemed quite pleasant and good, although neither of us talked about marriage. I must admit, I didn't pay enough attention to what happened soon. Having accepted an invitation to yet another neighbor's party, I wandered around the backyard. Dee couldn't take the day off this time, so I ended up there alone. The only thing, or rather, who I really should have avoided was our neighbor, who was an approachable woman. Her name was Bevan. She was a flirt who loved to flirt and openly tried to interest me, which led Tasses into a rage. "I don't care what you do, but God forbid I hear that you spent even 5 seconds alone with Bevan. Is that clear, mister?" She reprimanded me, angrily sparkling her eyes and poking her finger at my chest. "Yes, sir. Or ma'am. Or dear. That's right, I understand." I saluted her. Well, I was a master at avoiding Bevan at this party. A couple of newcomers to our community who organized this entertainment for the neighbors Randy and Harley were dressed quite boldly that evening. In Harley's case, this was clearly noticeable. She behaved quite relaxed. At the same time, Randy seemed completely unfazed by his wife's provocative behavior. After some time had passed, the party seemed to be ending, as several of the men in the backyard were no longer visible. I decided that I had spent enough time to satisfy the requirements for a polite visitor accepted at such events. Randy was just directing one of the remaining guys into the house when I tapped him on the shoulder to say goodbye. He turned around. "Are you sure you want to leave yet, Dale? Things get pretty exciting down there in the bedroom, if you know what I mean." He grinned and winked at me knowingly. "Yes, I am sure. Welcome to our area. Say hi to Harley," I replied. Well, then come on, follow me through the house. You can go out the front door." I followed Randy. We walked quite close to the half-open door. Something interesting was clearly happening there. I just smiled and continued walking towards the exit of the house. If only I had known where this was going, I could have been better prepared for the storm of shit that would hit me later that evening. "You pathetic bastard. How could you?" There was a cry from the enraged D, who exploded into the house like a whirlwind. "How could I? Cheating with our new neighbor. Bevan said that every man who was at their party did it. Not true. I avoided Bevan at all costs and didn't see Harley again after the first hour or so, although I heard it when I left. Ask Randy, I had no part in any of this. Bevan said something completely different. Briefly speaking, take your shit and go to the guest bedroom. You won't sleep with me tonight, okay?" She raged. That evening was the beginning of the end. After that, everything never returned to normal. After 2 months of living in the same shared house, but alone, I warned Dee that things had better get better, otherwise I would move out. Looking back, I can say that if we were ultimately heading towards a breakup, then at that moment it was the right time for this. Before that, we had already discussed the possibility of getting married and starting a real family several times, but we never moved beyond conversations. Moreover, the absence of children drew a line under our relationship. The only thing that truly shocked me was how quickly Dee's love turned into hatred based solely on the words of the person she said she always despised. If Dee was such a mentally unstable person, then perhaps I should have thanked my lucky stars that we broke up when we did. Although, try to say this to my heart, which is aching from unfulfilled hopes. In the end, I found another apartment and moved out. Somehow, I wasn't at all shocked when Bevan left a message on my cell phone shortly after, asking if I wanted to meet her. I never called her back. It's just that there wasn't enough of her in my life. I had been alone for almost a year when my heart received an unwanted jolt. Over the years, I still haven't gotten around to deleting Dee's contact information from my cell phone. So when it buzzed one Saturday night and Dee's number flashed on the screen, I didn't know what to do. My stomach suddenly tightened, my heart raced faster, and my palms began to sweat. What the hell did she want? The easiest way was to send a message, and after long, unsuccessful trills, the phone fell silent for a while, and then briefly rang, notifying me of his arrival. "Hey, Dale. I was wondering if you'd like to meet up sometime. I owe you an apology, and I'd like to do it in person." I read a text message from Dee. Damn it. I ended things with her and tried to move on with my life. Why should I now give her the opportunity to clear her conscience? Yes, I still had strong feelings for her, but with some sixth sense I knew that it was better not to renew this relationship. So I answered, "Thanks, no," which prompted the immediate question, "Why?" I could say, "Because I hate you." I could say, "You're not worth my time." I could also write, "Because you are crazy." Instead of all this, I didn't answer her. I woke up on Sunday morning to find a series of new text messages from Dee. Since I didn't want to meet with her, she was apparently going to put everything she knew and wanted to tell me in a bunch of text messages, so they poured into my phone one after another. Apparently Randy and Harley filmed their games, as well as what they offered. Somebody's divorce lawyer got wind of it and filed a lawsuit. An analysis of the video presented in court in this case detailed who was involved in the act. As I emphasized on that fateful day, I was not one of the characters in their party. Wow, now she believed me and regretted what she had said and done. Although I haven't kept an eye on her since our breakup, I decided to give Dee a taste of her own bitter medicine. I wrote, "It doesn't matter now. From what I hear after I left, you became one of the most easily accessible ones in the area. I know I could never live with a woman of her behavior. Have a happy life, Dee." Almost instantly, the phone rang. "Dale, that's not true. Who did you hear that from? That's not who I am." Let her be angry. Maybe it will be good for her. I didn't answer. Unsurprisingly, my phone started ringing within minutes, and I finally turned it off. Let's talk about how to touch a nerve. Maybe I should have kept statistics. After my remark about her frivolity, a barrage of several dozen SMS and voice messages fell on my cell phone, of course. All of them remained unanswered. She desperately wanted to protect her reputation. How could I allow even a tiny thought that this was true? The flow of messages and calls stopped only after 2 weeks. Glory to the eggs. The last one sounded like this. "I'm so sorry. I understood everything. I made a wild accusation that you couldn't defend. I finally realized that you did the same thing to me. I threw out a good man, and now I regret it. I'll leave you alone. But I still love you. Dee." A week later, I decided to meet Dee for a drink or two. Why? It was difficult for me to explain this even to myself. Perhaps her last text message gradually melted my previous resolve not to communicate with her anymore. Part of me screamed, "Run!" But the main idiot assured me that he had everything under control. Dee came to our meeting fully armed. While we were together, she always dressed quite conservatively, but today her appearance was special. Dale, my eyes are up here, she said with a grin on her face. And they are very beautiful too, Dee, I answered with difficulty, tearing my gaze away and raising my eyes upward. You went out of your way to make me admire you, so it would be impolite for me to ignore you. How are you doing? Full of optimism. And you? It's too early to say. What should I order you to drink? White wine. That hasn't changed. Don't you think this skirt is too short? She asked as if by chance. It might not be suitable for a church, but it's just right for a bar like this. Do you come here often? I asked. For the first time. I was hoping to find someone like you. What about you? You're probably a regular here. Yeah, this is my favorite place to pick up girls. Usually there is a large selection of them here, I said in a rather casual tone. This made Dee shudder involuntarily. However, I noticed it and grinned back. I have some reason to believe that you are one of the guys who are loyal to the extreme, she said with some sadness in her voice. Therefore, I think it would not be amiss to ask, will I interfere with your current girlfriend? Did I mention that part of my inner self was saying, run? After our breakup, I admit that I briefly enjoyed a few casual one-night stands, and I was in no way ready for another long-term relationship, especially with Dee. Now I have decided that honesty is the best policy. No, at the moment my heart doesn't trust any woman. It may be months or even years before I have the courage to put myself through that kind of pain again. At these words, Dee's eyes clouded with sadness. I'm so sorry, Dale. Can I interest you in a friends with benefits offer so you don't forget about me? She probably understood that I was in her hands. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. First, I need to buy protective equipment, I muttered. She shuddered again and began. But you don't need. And then, shaking his head, okay, at your place or at my place? She asked, lowering her voice and breathily, leaning across the table towards me. Let's go with you. This way I can leave when I need to. Dee, I know what you want, for us to be together again. I'm really sorry. What we had before no longer suits me, I once admitted to her. Perhaps I need help to understand why I have become so emotionally distant. And I don't want to mislead you. Your attitude is wonderful, but I just can't find the love I had before again. Dale, I notice that, she answered with a sigh. You are no longer the person I knew before. I'm ready to give you more time to find yourself. I still blame myself for doing this to you. I stopped calling her, but Dee didn't. She never ceased to keep me updated on the events of her life. Even though I refused, she continued to periodically invite me to stay at her place for the night. The problem was that it wasn't just Dee that I wasn't interested in. I came to terms with the fact that I needed professional help to overcome the depression that had taken over me. Dave, my counseling psychologist, had some good success and convinced me to invite Dee to join us for a few sessions. During them, he was not politely gentle with her, persistently getting to the very essence of the problems and contradictions that existed between us. The realization that Dee had never truly trusted me made her return home in tears. As a result, she took it one step further and began conducting her own private consultations. Gradually, in small steps, we resumed our friends with benefits meetings, and I began to think that over time we might work our way up to being in a serious relationship again. I had been divorced from Celeste for 5 years when one day she suddenly left a message for me at my parents' house. I waited a few days before calling her back. I had absolutely no reason to talk to her again, but natural curiosity took over. Celeste, this is Dale. You called me. Thank you for calling, the half-forgotten, but so familiar voice of his ex-wife came through the receiver. Wendell and I need to talk to you about something very important, and we were wondering if we could meet. We could treat you to dinner, if you want. I agreed to a meeting in a cafe located near the house where I live. Dee decided to join me. Celeste was accompanied by a man whom she introduced as her husband, Wendell. She was dressed quite stylishly, looked good, and was quite sociable. After the waitress took our orders and left, Celeste looked at each other with her husband, as if gathering determination for the test, after which she took out an envelope and placed it on the table in front of her. "Dale, I have one confession to make, and then I have a favor to ask of you. When I gave birth to the baby, well, you and I were still married then. Anyway, I named Wendell his father. But, we recently discovered that this is not the case. Anyway, Dale, his father is you." Dee squeezed my hand until it hurt. My heart started beating faster, and I felt my stomach tighten. "Do you want to say anything about this?" Celeste drawled slightly, frowning, carefully observing my reaction. "What is your request?" Having controlled myself, I muttered. "Wendell Jr. needs a bone marrow donor, and I was hoping you would be willing to do it for him. I have here," she put her hand on top of an envelope lying on the table, "I have a DNA test that shows that Wendell is not the boy's father. The only other person who could be his father is you. The DNA test and doctor's report on Wendell Jr. are in this envelope. You will need to be tested to see if you are compatible, but since I am not a donor match, the doctors have said that you are almost certainly compatible with your own son. I passed my biological samples to the bank long before we met. I objected. I may have several, perhaps even dozens of children that I conceived but never met in my life. Why do you think that your child is more deserving of my time and a piece of my body than they are? Unlike others, he was conceived naturally. Doesn't that mean anything?" She squeezed out. "Not for me. Your child, in my opinion, is no different from any others I may have ever conceived. I have absolutely no emotional attachment to any of them. If this is what the lying woman gave birth to, then so be it. If that's all you've got, then it's time for me to get back to work." "Please don't call my wife names," this ferret sitting opposite intervened. Celeste squeezed his hand. "Don't pay him any attention, Wendell. If he wants to communicate that way, well, but we shouldn't stoop to his level." Looking at the ruffled window, I continued. "Tell me, is she cheating on you the same way she cheats on me?" "Wendell, that's not true." Celeste was alarmed. I never cheated on him. I didn't have any lover. He's always lying." Dee laughed and began to mock Celeste. Oh, I've never cheated. Wendy, it's not considered cheating with you." Celeste, with her face revealed by spots, was practically screaming. "Fuck you, Dale. How can you turn your back on your son so coldly?" "I'll tell you what," I cut off her screams. "I will find out if there is a way to check if anything is possible, but so far unknown to me, children are sick. If there is one and his mother does not turn out to be a deceitful woman, then I will help that child. How do you like this?" I stood up from my seat, indicating that the conversation was over, lifted Dee to his feet, and headed towards the door. Before we had time to take a few steps, Wendell spoke, unlike Celeste, in a conciliatory and pleading tone. "Dale, we need your help. Talk to us. What is needed for this?" Stopping and turning around, I presented my conditions. Correct my son's birth certificate to list me as his father, and then change his name to Darrell Thomas Solomon. If you do this, then I'll see if I'm compatible with him. Until that happens, don't even think about bothering me again. After that, Dee and I left, although they begged me to stay and talk to them. Dee wasn't sure how to break the ice. "What are you thinking about, Dale?" "I think you are a much nicer and kinder woman than she is." "Are you going to help the boy? His name is Darrell. It seems you can't trust me completely, can you?" I'm sorry. If I trust you, will you marry me? This matter could turn out to be unpleasant, you understand?" I have asked you a question. I've been thinking about my life prospects for some time. Together, Dee and I made great progress in therapy, and I truly loved it. So what the hell? Yes, I will marry you if you help me with this matter, I finally answered, and her face lit up. Can you issue a new birth certificate and documents for a name change? Oh yes, I will be happy to help you. The next day I was busy with some work, but Dee delivered the already completed documents by courier. The instructions to Celeste and Wendell were to complete all the paperwork with the notary and then call us to set up the next appointment. The kit also included a DNA testing kit, so I could see if Doral was really my child. Another day passed before we met them again. It's nice that you joined us today. Did you bring the completed documents as agreed? Dee asked busily, acting very professional. Yes, everything is here in the envelope. And here's a DNA swab from from Doral. Celeste quickly corrected herself, stuttering for a second. I immediately intervened. We will not submit these documents until all medical procedures are completed. By the way, I have a list of questions that you both will have to answer. We need to determine how medical expenses will be paid. As far as I know, you also have a 2-year-old daughter. Yes, Audrey celebrated her 2nd birthday last month. When are you getting tested, Dale? As soon as my consultant tells me everything is okay. That evening, I gave Dee detailed instructions on how to prepare the documents. This contradicts my common sense, she told me with some doubt, but I trust you, Dale. For our sake, I hope that whatever you have in mind is not only legal, but also successful. Didn't I tell you how much I love you? Very soon you will love me as much as I love you. Oh, that's it, I'm daydreaming. You'll never catch up with me in this, mister. Dee laughed. Another day passed, and we all gathered around the negotiating table again. Thank you for joining us. Although I'm not too sure that I want to help you, I began the dialogue with a slight frown. Dale, please don't say such things, Celeste sobbed pleadingly. The boy really needs your help because his condition has begun to deteriorate. Does Doral like his sister Audrey? I asked a question that, apparently, they did not expect. Why, yes, she answered, sniffling. Does Audrey like her brother Doral? Yes, but why? It would be a pity to separate them, I interrupted her question. If you want me to authorize a bone marrow transplant, then you must give me full custody of both children. In my opinion, it would be too difficult to separate brother and sister. Wendell and Celeste at the other end of the table turned into pillars of salt, their eyes rolling and their mouths open in shock. And I don't think it would be a good idea for you to have visitation rights for the next 2 years. Let them get used to their new parents first, I added. Wendell was the first to unfreeze. His face contorted, and jumping up from his seat, he shouted, "What the heck? No way I will allow you to steal my daughter. Sorry, ferret, but you stole my child first. So what's the difference then?" I shrugged. I didn't steal it. Celeste told me that I was his father. This is a turn, isn't it? To think that the cheater lied to you, what a surprise. Tell me, did you know she was married when you started being with her? Wendell didn't answer, but pulled back, plopping back into his chair and looking somewhere to the side. Come on, you asshole, answer this fucking question. Why, yes, he squeezed out with difficulty. I see. Apparently, it's normal for you to steal someone else's wife. You have an excellent set of moral principles. Congratulations, you two are simply made for each other, bending lips in an ironic smile, I stated. Then he slammed his palm on the table. Okay, do you want me to help you? Then register the children, both children, on me. Dee has already prepared all the documents for this. Celeste sniffled, barely holding back her sobs. Dale, how can you be so heartless? Look in the mirror, I snapped. In it, you will see how heartlessness itself looks back at you. Briefly speaking, I won't repeat it again. Bring the completed documents and bring the children when you are ready to continue the conversation. Wendell and Celeste were sobbing into each other's shoulders as Dee and I left the room. After this meeting, Dee was very quiet, and from time to time I caught the worried glances she cast at me. What she saw and heard during the negotiations greatly disturbed her. You know, Dale, this is a side of you that I never knew existed. It sounds like you have a lot of repressed anger inside of you, she told me. Dee was probably right. I felt that something was accumulating inside me and was looking for a way out. When I started speaking, my voice was not loud, but after just a few minutes, I was almost screaming. What makes you think that? I fell in love, then got married, and then served my country so that my family could have a better life. I did what a husband and head of the family was supposed to do. And what happened? Someone just took my heart and tore it out. You can understand how I felt then, right? Oh, wait a minute. No, Di, you can't, because later, when I was with you, I acted with the same responsibility with which I should have acted. But was that enough for you? Nuuo, I'm treated like crap, and my heart is being mercilessly ripped out again. Now they tell me that I have a son who was stolen from me. Did something similar happen in your life too? I don't think so. Maybe you're right. I'm overreacting. What am I thinking about now? Let me take a deep breath and stop being so childish. What I'm thinking is that maybe I was too hasty. Maybe it's not such a good idea for us to get married. I started to get up with the intention of leaving when Dee attacked me. She was as loud and boisterous in her speech as I was. Sit down now. You're not going anywhere. Like this. Look, I'm so sorry. I tried to make amends to you. I screwed up. I know it. You know it. And I didn't doubt you. I was just trying to get you to talk to me. I think I succeeded. Maybe now you can calm down a little. I hope so. Yes, you're right. Celeste gave you a big shit. And then I added my own crap. Sorry again for this. I agreed to trust you with this DNA matter, but you have an advantage over me. Honestly, I have no idea where this is all going to lead, and what the hell are we going to do with 2 children? She exclaimed, clutching her head. So forgive me if I seem too worried to you, but until you let me in on your plans, I think I have the right to be nervous. We both had tears in our eyes by this point. I swallowed the lump in my throat and answered, Sorry, what you said. I admit it's true. Now take your pencil and notepad and let me tell you what I hope will happen soon. I made my next request to Dee. Hearing my plan, she immediately perked up. As I prepared for the new meeting, I really wasn't sure that Celeste and Wendell would capitulate after all. But only 2 days passed before the children were taken to Dee. I've never seen 2 adults cry so hard. Dee and I took the kids to the mall cafeteria and waited. About 15 minutes later, I was informed that Celeste had headed to the underground parking lot. We intercepted them there, already getting into the car, leading the children. Audrey ran on her short, hurried legs towards Celeste and Wendell, greeting them with joyful squeals as if they were long-lost friends. They were both completely confused, looking as if aged for 10 years. What? Dale, I thought you didn't want us to see them for 2 years? Celeste asked me stammeringly, with red eyes and drooping shoulders, nevertheless, automatically hugging little Audrey to her. I never intended to file for guardianship. I wanted you to prove how much you love your children, I replied. The documents are drawn up in such a way that I can submit them to court at any time, right up to their 18th birthday. If I ever find out that these children have ever been treated roughly or cruelly, I will come to court to take them away from you, I promised sternly. But Dale, are you still going to get tested? She asked with a flash of hope. No, I took the test the day after our first meeting. I'm about as incompatible with Doral as it gets. My mismatched blood type immediately disqualified me from becoming a donor for the boy. This also proves that your son's father is not me. This is a surprise, right, Ferret? I threw towards Wendell, who froze at this news, like a deer jumping into the road in headlights. And as for you, Celeste, you really were a cheater all along, weren't you? Wendell looked shocked and completely confused. Celeste shouted, "This can't be. So you are also a medical expert now?" I mocked her ironically. I suggest you find his real father, or hope like hell that someone suitable appears on the donor registry. Due to privacy laws, I never found out who saved Wendell Juar. All I know is that he spent 11 weeks in the hospital before he was allowed to go home with Celeste and figurehead Dad Wendell. Dee stayed in touch with them because she wanted everything to have a happy ending. I kept my promise and proposed to Dee. Well, mostly me, I still have some problems to solve. Dave, our personal consultant, conducted more than one session, helping me to overcome my problems with controlling anger. At the same time, he helped Says accept me as I am. Dee and I already have 2 girls. Celeste and Wendell tried a couple more times to have their own Wendell Jr. Alas, it didn't work out. More precisely, it worked out, but not the way they wanted. Wendell Jr. now has 3 sisters. There couldn't have been a better pair of twins. As for my supposed children, for whom I once sacrificed my biological samples, I have not yet been able to find any of them, if they exist at all. With all these DNA search sites out there, I think it's only a matter of time before they are discovered. If they ever need me, I'll do whatever it takes, but maybe without any fuss this time. Dee and I fed all the documents we got from Celeste to the paper shredder. And yes, I know I probably acted like a real ass, but I think I had every right to do so. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. Third story. I'm a country boy. My name is Bill Carlson. I have a degree in animal science, and all I ever wanted was to own my own feed store and raise a family. After graduating from college, I married my high school sweetheart, Janice. We grew up together, and she was the only girl I ever imagined myself living with. She was a pretty brunette and had a nice body, even after giving birth to 2 boys. I was proud that she was my wife and was ready to do anything for her. Janice had one problem. She envied people who led a social life. She read the gossip columns in the newspapers and subscribed to all the magazines that featured beautiful people. When she went to the dentist, she read car magazines, and she was familiar with all the fancy cars. She knew all the designers and was familiar with their clothing lines. She wanted to be someone more than anything in the world, and I couldn't provide that for her. I got a job in Omaha at a fancy feed store that catered to yuppies. This allowed us to be closer to the big city, and I could still do what I loved. I liked my job and I was good at it. I was able to treat clients differently, and the company rewarded my efforts by giving me a flexible schedule. Janice liked living in the city more than in the country, and for a time she was happy. When she decided to go to work, we had to send the kids to daycare, but they didn't seem to mind. Janice worked for a medical equipment company called Gilbert Medical. They produced syringes and other medical supplies. It was an office job, and she seemed happy because it allowed her to dress up and meet people who weren't farmers. She worked a lot and seemed to lose interest in our family life. I ended up taking care of the boys most of the time. I took them to kindergarten and picked them up after work. I fed them and got them ready for bed as usual. I even cooked food and ended up cleaning the house most of the time. She did the laundry and made sure all her clothes were perfectly ironed. We saved money every month so that I could eventually open my own feed store. Now it turned out that even with her working, we could no longer put anything off. Some money was spent on daycare, but most of it was spent on trips to beauty salons, nail salons, and expensive clothing stores. I had a hard time understanding how we could have two jobs and save less money. She refused to discuss it and became very defensive and upset when I brought it up. After a while, I stopped even mentioning it. However, I opened another savings account that I could maintain separately. She started working overtime. They started calling her on the phone in private. She became less attentive in bed. She wanted a newer and more sophisticated car. She even talked about getting breast implants. There was no doubt in my mind that my wife was having an affair. I may be a simple country boy, but I wasn't stupid. At that moment, I didn't even want to save the marriage. I just wanted to work things out and move on before it was too late. It was hard to pinpoint anything because I didn't interact with the people she worked with, but I was pretty sure that if something happened, it was with someone at work. I worked with a couple of good guys. They were not very educated, but they worked hard. My job made me their boss, but I never played the boss card. The work always seemed to get done without the need to boss them around. Everyone knew what was required, and we all worked together. The guys appreciated this, and it made for good relationships. Roy and Freddie would become valuable allies in my plan. I noticed that on Wednesdays, Janice always wore fancy lingerie and her best outfits. She seemed to need more time to get ready for work. I decided this was the right time to start. I told the guys what was going on, and they agreed to take care of my deliveries and appointments that day. I parked at the entrance to the Gilbert Medical Plant parking lot. This gave me a good opportunity to catch up on the technical part. Around 11 a.m., Janice went out and got into her car. It was not difficult to follow her, and a few minutes later she parked in the Holiday Inn parking lot. She parked at the west end of the lot, far from the office. A few minutes later, a guy in a red Corvette pulled up and parked at the east end of the lot. I didn't recognize the car, but when he got out, Janice got out of hers. They walked to the outer room on the second floor, number 117, and then went inside. He already had the key. My heart sank, and I felt a slight queasy feeling in my stomach. All I did was confirm my suspicions. I had no idea what I would do next. I decided to quit and go back to work. I would take my time planning my next step. Before leaving the lot, I got out of the car and cut two of her valve stems with my wire cutters, one in front and one in back. I was a little furious. I don't know why I didn't give him a few punctures too. The rest of the day passed extremely slowly. I picked up the kids after work, went home and cooked dinner. When she came in, I asked how her day was, and she said everything was fine, except that she had a flat tire. One of the guys at work changed it for her. Nothing more was said about this. The next morning, I stopped by the plant after dropping the boys off at kindergarten. It didn't take me long to find a red Corvette. Luckily, the guy had a reserved parking spot with a sign. I wrote down, Ken Beauchamp, Distribution Manager. Roy's wife worked at Gilbert Medical in the Human Resources Department. By that evening, I knew everything there was to know about the good old tick. The most important thing was that he was already married. He was reprimanded for making sexual advances to one of his employees and had some problems with his expense accounts. I got his address, phone number, cell phone number, and even his SSN. But I didn't know what to do with this information. He was married for 8 years and his wife's name was Amy. We did a good job, and Roy, Freddie, and I had time to have a beer before I had to pick up the kids. I still wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I was sure that everything would work out soon. I tried to remain calm and logical in this situation, but in reality I was getting crazier every day. From time to time I found myself silently crying. I was in pain and felt like I couldn't fix myself. Living with Janice was becoming increasingly difficult for me. I just wanted it to end. The next day I got lucky again when I remembered that one of my best clients, Marge Gilbert, was the wife of the president of Gilbert Medical. I never met him, but we got along great. I was being especially friendly with Marge trying to see if I could use our relationship to my advantage, when Marge's daughter Cindy arrived. Cindy was in her final year of veterinary school. Marge went into the barn to do some work, and Cindy and I talked for about an hour. I enjoyed my time with her and felt a little guilty after I left, but it went away quickly. That weekend, I spent some time in the garage welding. I took a small piece of flat steel and welded 4 sharp points to it. I made the ends out of dowels so they would be really hard and stiff. The plate was approximately 15 by 15 centimeters in size, and this was supposed to be my first step towards taking revenge for the harassment. I saw Marge again on Tuesday. I was a little mopey while unloading the order and just wasn't myself. This caught her attention. "Bill, what's going on today? Why are you so gloomy?" "I have some personal problems, Marge. Sorry, I'm not in the right company today. Let's have coffee and you can tell me about it." We went into the house and sat down in the kitchen. It looked like the interior of a restaurant. Everything was stainless steel and granite. It looked like a magazine. I thought to myself that Janice would love this. Marge put the coffee on the table, leaned forward and asked, "Well, how can you help me, Marge?" "Well, I don't know until you explain the problem to me." I really didn't want to talk to her about it, but I finally decided that maybe it could help. My wife Janice works at Gilbert Medical, and I think she's being forced to have sex with one of her bosses, but I can't prove anything. "Why do you think this is happening?" "Mostly little things, but last week I caught them both together at the Holiday Inn. My wife doesn't understand that I know, and I don't know how to bring this up. I don't know if this is something she is made to feel obligated to do or if this is something she wants to do. Our family life has deteriorated to the point where she doesn't seem to care about the kids or me. She seems to be keeping it a secret, and that's what really bothers me." "Who is this guy?" "I think his name is Ken Beauchamp. I don't know if Janice works for him or if they work in different parts of the plant. I've never met him." "Do you want me to see if I can help?" I was silent for a while and lowered my head. "If you think something can be done quietly, I'd be happy to try, but I don't want to make a fuss." "Okay, let me handle this. See you next Thursday with the oatmeal delivery." I thanked her and, getting up to leave, asked, "Where is Cindy?" "Back to school. She'll be home this weekend. Why don't you bring the boys so she can meet them?" Wow, this turned out much better than I expected. I'm sure Janice will have no problem letting me take the boys out. This could be a good weekend. The next morning, it was pouring rain. Janice dressed carefully for her special day again, and I said nothing as I watched. Taking children to the children's center, I stopped by work. The guys were ready to replace me on the morning shift. Roy was going to use my truck and do my deliveries and journal entries. I would initialize all the entries after I get back to work. Freddie brought his cousin's van to work, and I loaded it with a jack. We attached my steel plate to the jack lift. We loaded up all the trucks, and after they left to pick up their deliveries, I headed to the Holiday Inn. Just in time. Janice pulled up and parked in the same spot as before. Ken fell behind her a few moments and also parked in the same spot as before. After they entered the room, I gave them about 10 minutes to get comfortable. I removed the jack from the back of the van in the pouring rain and rolled it over to Ken's car. I slid the jack under the engine block and lifted it up. It only took a few seconds before I heard a pop as the nails pierced the oil pan. I threw him to the ground and climbed into the back seat of the Corvette. A few seconds later, I heard the same popping sounds in the fuel tank. Oil and gasoline were leaking. I carried the jack back to the van. All this took less than a minute. I went down to Janice's car and sliced the 2 flaps again. By then, I was ready to leave. I drove past Ken's car, threw the lit cigarette out the window, and drove away. Through the rearview window, I saw flames shoot up, and a few seconds later I heard an explosion as I pulled out of the parking lot. I felt better. Janice returned home from work a little late. She didn't have dinner and went straight to bed. I played with the boys for a bit, gave them a bath, and put them to bed. That night I slept on the couch. Janice stayed in bed the next morning while I got the boys ready for preschool. We had breakfast and left. She never got up. She never said anything. I didn't ask. Her car was not in the driveway. Around 9 a.m., after we had loaded all the trucks, I was visited by Police Lieutenant John Fritz. He was a fairly friendly guy. "Tell me about your work schedule yesterday." "Regular deliveries, nothing special." "Why are you asking?" "Can you report your time around noon?" I went to the office and took the delivery logs from the previous day. I placed them in front of him. Each stop included the location, the item delivered, the time of unloading, and my initials. He smiled and chuckled slightly. "This is a pretty good magazine. Do you guys do this every day?" "Would you like to see the magazines for the last month?" He shook his head and smiled again. I didn't know if I should feel good or bad. "Would you like to tell me what's wrong?" He seemed reluctant to go into detail, but eventually he opened up. "A car was damaged yesterday at the Holiday Inn in East Omaha, and we're trying to find out if anyone knows anything about it." "What did I do?" "Well, the other car, which was parked next to the damaged one, had 2 valve stems cut. The car belonged to your wife. We were wondering if this was a coincidence or not. First of all, I don't know what my wife's car was doing in the Holiday Inn parking lot. And secondly, what did she have to do with the damaged car?" "The damaged car belonged to the employee with whom she worked. Apparently, they had a lunch meeting with the company's clients at the hotel, and it all happened while they were having lunch." "Did you talk to the people they had lunch with?" "No. They couldn't remember their names." "Do you want to be honest with me, or are we going to play games all morning?" He leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Do you know a guy named Ken Beauchamp?" "I've never met this man, and this is the honest truth." "I believe you." He smiled again. "I don't like to interfere in family squabbles, and I hope that I won't have to come to you again. Here is my business card. Call me before anything else happens." "Fine." He shook my hand. "Sorry that I had to bring this to your attention. If there is anything I can do to help, please let me know." "Fine." When he left, I said, "Thank you, but you didn't really tell me anything." Put it all together. After work, when the kids and I returned home, Janice's car was in the driveway. She was casually dressed and had prepared dinner. She said she didn't feel well and said she was sick. She still didn't say anything about what happened the day before, so I didn't bring it up. She went to bed early and I took care of the boys again and slept on the couch. The next day, she was up and getting ready for work. When I left with the boys for kindergarten, taking them in, I went into the doctor's office and asked to check for diseases. Work was normal for a Friday. When I returned home, Janice was there again. After dinner, I told her I was taking the boys to spend the next day at one of my clients' farms. I asked her if she would like to come with me, knowing full well that she would find a reason to refuse. She said she needed to do some shopping, and I didn't insist. I didn't care if it was shopping or a date. The results were the same. Saturday with Cindy and the boys at the Gilbert Ranch was great. We spent the whole day having fun. Marge cooked a great lunch for everyone, and I didn't want it to end. Cindy loved boys, and they seemed to really like her too. Mr. Gilbert wasn't there, so I never got to meet him. Marge didn't say anything at all about our previous conversation, and Cindy didn't seem to know about it. I really didn't want to go home, but in the end we had to. Janice didn't ask at all how our day was. She just didn't care. The boys tried several times to tell her everything they needed to do, but she ignored them. Eventually they gave up trying. She asked why I no longer slept in bed, and I explained that due to problems at work, I tossed and turned a lot and did not want to disturb her sleep. That was the last thing she said about it. The next week went completely normal. On her special day, I noticed that she didn't make any special preparations, so I assumed that the date for that day had been canceled. This was fine with me, because I had a lot of work to catch up on. I went to see a divorce lawyer I had heard about, and she gave me several handouts and brochures with a lot of information. She had several completed forms that looked interesting. Everything was back to normal until the following Wednesday. She started with a morning shower and then carefully styled her hair. She was wearing new, black, sexy underwear and new perfume. It even looked like new shoes. I was careful that she wouldn't notice me watching, and I ran out with the boys. I was sure it would be a date day. After dropping off the boys, I drove into the plant and checked its parking space. In its place stood a new Porsche Boxer. I wrote down the car number and hurried back to work. The guys were just as excited about the new development as I was. We rushed through all the morning deliveries and falsified the logs again. I'm sure John Fritz saw through this ruse, but we did it anyway. We had a free and long lunch. Roy continued the delivery. Freddie went to a pool supply store and bought 2 large bottles of hydrochloric acid. I went to lunch with John Fritz. John looked at me strangely when I walked into his office with pulled pork sandwiches, fries, and a couple bottles of Coca-Cola. I said hello and sat down opposite him. He realized that something had happened and smiled from ear to ear. I said I thought we could have lunch together and he could fill me in on the car damage. I had to figure out how to keep him occupied for 2 hours. Lunch promised to be long. While I was trying to be nice, Freddie was in the Holiday Inn parking lot. He found Boxer and carefully doused the trunk, fenders, and hood with acid. He cut open the convertible top and doused the leather seats and floor mats with acid. The dashboard also took a dose of acid. To make it even more convincing, he put a box of mothballs in the gas tank. Gasoline would be bad for the engine if someone started it. The remaining acid spread over the top of the tires. Before leaving, he cut the valve stems on Janice's car again. It was all over within 15 minutes. The only bad part was that I didn't know how long the two of them would be in the room together. John and I chatted for a long time about frivolous things until he finally asked, "What the hell are you up to?" "Just wanted to make sure I had a good alibi in case something happened to Ken Beauchamp's car today." "What's special today?" "The pulled pork sandwich was special." I took out my cell phone and called the kindergarten. "Hello, Carol. This is Bill Carlson. I'll be busy at work this afternoon and was hoping you could call Janice and ask her to come and pick up the boys." "Thank you. I really appreciate it. You can reach her at 874-321-11, extension 117. You may have to ask her by name. Try to call as soon as possible to make sure you can catch her. Fine? Thanks again." John leaned back in his chair and chuckled. God, those pulled pork sandwiches were delicious. Everyone was silent for a while, and finally John said, "Do you think I should call Mr. Beauchamp and ask how his car is?" "Why do you want to do this?" "Do you happen to know where I could contact him?" I gave him his cell phone number and room number 117 at the Holiday Inn. "Choose one." John turned on the speakerphone and dialed the hotel number. After several rings, Ken Beauchamp answered, breathing heavily. "Hello? Who is this?" "Mr. Beauchamp, this is Detective Fritz. I'm calling to let you know that we still have no leads as to who damaged your car." "Why are you calling here? Where did you get this number from?" "I'm a policeman, Mr. Beauchamp." "Have you already bought a new car?" "Yes, I bought it." "Why are you asking?" "I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have a repeat of the previous incident." "Is the car with you now?" "Yes. She's in the parking lot." "Everything is fine?" "Let me check." We could hear Ken muttering in the background as he scanned the parking lot through the window. There were several piercing screams and a quiet groan. He returned to the phone. "Is there something wrong? I need to get dressed and go check. I'll call you back right away." "Fine." "Mr. Beauchamp, why aren't you dressed right now?" "None of your damn business. I have to go." They both hung up. John looked at me and smiled. Are you happy? Certainly. Look, I need to get back to work. If you have any questions, call me, okay? Maybe we'll have lunch again next week. I hope no. This needs to end soon before anyone gets hurt. I went back to work. Roy brought the magazines into compliance, and Freddie hid the acid bottles where no one would find them. Tonight at home promises to be interesting. Janice took the boys but said nothing and went back to bed early. John came to see me the next day. He explained all the damage to the car and that Ken's insurance didn't pay out after the Corvette incident. The car was completely repaired. He lost over $60,000. Ken insisted I had something to do with it, even after John told him I was with him when it happened. Of course, John knew I was involved, but he couldn't prove anything, and I don't think he wanted to. I don't know how Janice fixed the tires. I never asked, and no one ever volunteered. Since Janice never admitted to the whole situation, I decided it was time to end it all. My disease test showed everything was fine. I filled out the paperwork for a lawyer to begin the divorce process. I was planning on going to the Gilbert Ranch this weekend with the boys in case Cindy would be there. If not, we'll spend the day with Marge. The only downside was that I still had no evidence of extramarital sex. The weekend went well. Cindy was there. The kids were delighted, and we all had a great time again. We were like family. I really missed it, and so did the boys. Cindy still didn't know what was going on, but at least she didn't ask. Before I left, Marge winked and said everything would be okay. I was offered a new position about 150 kilometers from here. It was for more money, a better job, and the opportunity to acquire a stake in the business in a few years. It was perfect. The only bad thing was that we wouldn't be around Cindy. The following Wednesday, Janice dressed up again. I don't know what kind of car her boyfriend used, but she was definitely getting ready for another visit with him. I assumed they were still going to the same place. I was going to do something, but I didn't really plan it in advance. The boys and I were trying to figure out what to do when Marge Gilbert pulled up. She motioned for me to come over and told me to get into the car. She didn't say anything, but simply went to the factory. She parked in the back and we walked through a private entrance straight into Mr. Gilbert's office. Marge introduced us and his secretary brought us all coffee. We talked about frivolous things for a while, and finally I spoke. "Did you bring me here for some reason?" Mr. Gilbert laughed. "It's time to end this show." Marge briefed me on what was going on, and I did a little internal research. Once everything is ready, we will begin. By the end of the day, we should have all the information you need. If I do anything to embarrass you, Bill, I apologize in advance. It is not my intention to hurt you. We chatted a little more to pass the time, and Marge noticed how I smiled when the conversation turned to Cindy. I tried not to show it, but I didn't do a good job. The phone rang and everyone's ears perked up. "What's happening?" "Fine. Thank you for calling. You know what to do now, right?" Mr. Gilbert smiled and said, "Okay, everything is in place. We can begin. Ken and your wife are in their usual room at the Holiday Inn. Ken drove there in a company Benz. This is against company policy, so he is being returned to the factory right now. I'm sorry to say, but I think your wife has a couple of flat tires too. It seems like it's a tradition of sorts." He turned on the speakerphone and dialed the number. "Ken, this is Mr. Gilbert. Sorry to bother you, but I have a very important matter to discuss with you." Ken stuttered slightly. "Yes, okay, no problem. Where did you get this number from?" "Ken, this is not important, but what is important is that the legal department was notified of a possible sexual harassment situation. I need to get the right answers here, Ken, so listen carefully. Is there a female company employee with you right now?" There was a pause and some background conversation that we could not make out. "Yes, sir." "Ken, is she there of her own free will or because of some kind of coercion or threats on your part? No, sir, under no circumstances. There was no coercion at all. She is here of her own free will. I didn't force her to do anything. So sex is consensual? Yes, sir, absolutely. Everything is by mutual consent. That's great, Ken. Thank you. That's all I needed to hear to make sense of this whole mess. I really appreciate your honesty on this sensitive issue. We will prepare a statement confirming this, and everything will be ready. Now, I need to clarify this with the young lady as well. Can you connect it, please? There was another barrage of background noise that we couldn't make out. Finally, Janice came on the line. Sir, how can I help you? Janice, did Mr. Beauchamp force you or threaten you in any way to go there with him? No, sir. He didn't threaten me in any way. Nice to hear. This means the sex was consensual and you were not intimidated in any way. Is that right? There was another pause and a lot of muffled talking. Janice appeared on the line again. Yes, sir, it was by mutual consent. Nice to hear. When you and Ken return to the plant, we will have statements ready for your signature. Could you reconnect Ken, please? Sir, how did you know my name? Don't worry about it, Janice. It doesn't matter. After Ken answered the phone again, Mr. Gilbert told him to go back to the plant so they could sign the papers in the legal department. He hung up and smiled. Marge, why don't you take Bill to lunch and come back in a couple of hours? By then, the lawyers should be finished, and we can all get our lives back to normal. We had a great lunch. I had a hard time keeping myself from crying, but I just couldn't thank her enough. She finally got me to agree that we would never talk about this topic or what was done ever again. She also made me promise not to tell Cindy anything about it at all. This was a good sign. I told Marge about my new job offer and she was happy for the boys and me. After lunch, we returned to the plant and I picked up notarized copies of Ken and Janice's statements. They both swore that they had consensual sex outside of marriage. The lawyers assured me that this was enough for my lawyer to file the divorce. Ken and Janice were both fired. Their personal belongings were packed before they got there, and they were escorted out of the building. Unfortunately, neither of them had a car. Marge gave me the use of her car and said I could return it the next day. I took the documents to the lawyers. She made me several copies of each. I was going to send one set to Ken's wife. I went to the bank and closed the accounts. I paid off all my credit cards and canceled them. I called the gas, water, electric, and telephone companies and made arrangements to shut off the utilities on Friday afternoon. I stopped by to see John Fritz and told him I was a good boy. He laughed. I notified the landlord that I will not be staying next month. I warned you at work. They were happy for me, but unhappy with my departure. Freddie followed me to the Gilbert Ranch in my truck so I could return the car to Marge. It's time to pick up the boys and go home. I was afraid to cross the threshold. Janice's car was not in the driveway. When we entered, she was sitting on the sofa and crying. This was the first time she showed any emotion at all. There were 2 boxes of her personal belongings from work. I fed the boys and turned on the TV for them. I stood next to her, as if giving her the opportunity to speak if she wanted. You should have done it, isn't it? Did you just have to ruin everything in my life? Why the hell couldn't you just mind your own business? You had no reason to interfere with mine? I was amazed. She still looked at the whole situation as if everything revolved around her. She didn't care about the kids or me at all. She didn't think about Ken's wife, Amy, at all. Our family, our lives, and our plans. All of this meant absolutely nothing to her. She only cared about what she was doing at the moment. Nothing else mattered. I felt relieved that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life with her. I said nothing. I went upstairs and took a shower. Later, as I was getting the boys ready for bed, she walked into the bedroom and closed the door. The next day, I took the boys to work with me. I just made sure there were no issues and that Roy and Freddie could stick to the system I had set up. We went to a few stores and packed up moving boxes. I passed by the Holiday Inn. Janice's car wasn't there, so I assumed she was already committed her. Repairing flat tires must have taken a toll on her shopping budget over the past month. Janice wasn't home when we arrived. We only took clothes and toys. I left everything else there so Janice could get rid of it. Of course, she didn't know that the next day all utilities would be shut off. Damn it, I was a sneaky son of a bitch. As we pulled out of the driveway, Janice was parking. She just stood by her car and watched us drive down the street. I took the boys to Chuck E. Cheese and we spent the night at a motel. The next morning, I took the boys to kindergarten. I gave Carol some cookies and party favors and told her it was the boys' last day and I wanted them to enjoy it with their friends. Before I left, she took me aside. "What happened to your wife last week?" I didn't want to ask, but since you're leaving, I'm dying of curiosity. She was very upset when I called. She insisted on knowing where I got the number from, and when I told her you gave it to me, she started swearing like a sailor. She didn't say anything when she took them, but I could tell she was really angry. "Sorry, Carol, I kind of set you up. Janice had an affair. She was at the Holiday Inn with her boyfriend, and I was hoping that if I could get you to call and break up their party, she'd change her mind about the whole thing. It didn't work. She ended up just getting angry at both of us. I'm serving her the divorce papers this afternoon, and the boys and I are leaving for our new jobs right after I pick them up. It was a cheap move on my part, and I apologize for dragging you into this. I went to see my divorce lawyer. She had everything ready. I took the kids and Janice could have visits anytime she wanted. I was fine with that because I didn't think she would be interested in them anyway. Everything else was divided equally, but there wasn't much to talk about. There was no alimony, no child support, no cash payments of any kind. I left her all the furniture, household appliances, and other household items. I really didn't need them. She kept her car. I didn't want her because her tires kept getting flat. All I had to do was give the documents to Janice. If she doesn't challenge it, everything will be finalized in 3 months. A copy of Ken and Janice's notarized declaration was included with the divorce papers. A small note in the margin, written by the lawyer, indicated that the statements would be kept confidential if all the terms of the divorce were agreed upon. There were no questions. The car was parked in the driveway, so I was sure she was home. I sat in the driveway for a long time. I loved Janice. She was the only girl I was ever close to. I thought our relationship was normal and didn't even think about the fact that I wasn't giving her what she craved. She never let me know directly, and I was too dumb to catch all the clues. I failed her in many ways. What she did was deception on her part, but I felt that it was partly due to my carelessness. I knocked on the door of my own house, and it was strange. She opened the door for me. She looked tired and asked if I wanted something to drink. I handed her the papers. She didn't open them. She just looked at them and back at me. I looked at her and asked, "Why?" I couldn't tell if she was angry or sad. After a few seconds, it finally opened. He smelled like aftershave and you smelled like fertilizer. He wore Armani suits while you wore jeans. He ate lobster and steak while you ate ribs and burgers. He was wearing a London fog coat while you were wearing a Carhartt. He drove a nice fancy car while you drove a truck. His nails were well groomed while yours were always dirty. He had a real job and you were still just a simple country boy. Is this enough for you? I can go on all day if you want. I was hoping for a life that you couldn't give me. I'm sorry we got married, Bill. I married you for the wrong reasons. I should have realized that you wouldn't be willing or able to give me what I really wanted. I saw you as a means, run away from my parents and didn't think far enough ahead. I truly regret this, but I cannot change how I feel. I love my children, but I regret having them. I know it sounds terrible, but I don't seem to have any maternal instincts. I hoped that finding someone who could fill the empty spaces in my dreams would make me feel fulfilled, but it only made me less satisfied with my current situation. I'm sorry that I misled you. I'm sorry I was a bad mother to my children. I don't regret chasing my dreams and looking for something better. What about his wife? What about your husband? What about your children? What about your family? Her behavior seemed to change immediately. My questions irritated her, and she no longer seemed to regret her actions. I don't give a damn about all this. Now it's my turn. I want to live the life I've always dreamed of. My peasant husband and two snotty, dirty-faced children do nothing to help me achieve this. I got your damn documents. Now just leave so I can move on with my life. Well, that simplified everything. I just turned around and walked it out. When I picked up the boys, Carol told me to let her know if I needed her to make any more phone calls. I called the utility companies and told them not to shut off until the end of the month. I guess I felt a little sorry for her. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I never heard anything from Janice. The lawyer said everything went smoothly as planned. My new job was great, but I missed the chance to buy a business. Someone else got it, along with a quarter of the prime land adjacent to it. My boss said they were going to turn it into some kind of horse farm. My job was secure, but my chance to own my own home was lost. 2 weeks later, they began construction next to the feed store. We were all trying to guess what was being built, and finally one of the guys asked the site engineer. It was a large animal veterinary clinic. I thought it was interesting, but dismissed it as wishful thinking. They erected the entire building in less than 60 days. The new owner was expected to arrive on Saturday. The boys and I passed by on our way to lunch. I was a little curious. Suddenly, both boys started shouting, "Cindy! Cindy!" Here she is, looking better than ever. Marge was with her. Cindy received her veterinary degree and wanted to breed show horses while running a large veterinary clinic. While Marge and I were talking, she was showing the boys the new building. We all went to lunch together, and Cindy told us that she was also building a new house on the property to be closer to her work. The boys and I smiled from ear to ear the whole way home that evening. 5 years later, Cindy was raising beautiful horses. Her clinic was a great success, and I had just opened my 6th feed store. The boys had 2 little sisters whom they adored. My mother-in-law, Marge, and Mr. Gilbert come every weekend. I never found out what his name was. Janice never came to see the boys. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you